Hi, I'm Sheila Kuehl, and coming up on Get Used to It, we're taking the show to Sacramento and talking to Assemblymember Carole Migden. Don't go away. Hi, welcome to Get Used to It. I'm Sheila Kuehl, your host, and for those of you who are longtime fans, you know that we do shows about issues of importance and interest to the gay and lesbian community, or everybody else about the gay and lesbian community. And today I'm really pleased to have as my guest Carole Migden, who's an assembly member in the California State Legislature and the all-powerful chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee in her very first full term. It's really fun to have you here, Carole, since you and I are the only two gay people in the Assembly here.
Absolutely.
We do these series sometimes because there are certain people, not a whole lot of them actually in the country, that everybody knows about, they read about, and who are very important to our movement, both as role models and in terms of the work that they have done. And there's a lot of curiosity about, well, how'd you get where you are and how'd you become the person you are? So if you don't mind, I'll ask you to start at the beginning. Where'd you come from?
Pleasing. Came from New York, not surprising to many. Haven't lost the accent over a number of years, and I found that it's a political asset in life. People tease New Yorkers. They find us to be fun or approachable, or there's something serious. I always say, nobody says, hi, you from Utah? You know me? From Kansas? Anyway, I grew up a suburban girl in Yonkers, New York, Westchester County. Moved out here in 1970 when I graduated from college. Worked in the Haight-Ashbury, Medical Clinic in the Haight. Detoxing heroin addicts was my first job.
You went to college in the East?
I went to college at Delphi University, a sort of a pristine kind of Ivy League school, a small women's college that became co-ed after World War II. Got a degree in English. Found out I wasn't such a tremendous student, but I liked to read books.
But that's a big leap, isn't it, from a you characterize yourself as a kind of a suburban girl.
That's what I was.
And then all of a sudden you're in a heroin detox clinic in Haight-Ashbury. There's a story on the path there, I think.
Well, I was a 60s child, and we all became activists. We were anti-war, even those of us that weren't especially militant. We became, I think, infused with a social agenda, and it characterized my peers or my contemporaries during the time. And we were, headstrong and idealistic and full of ourselves in very good ways, really. And I cared about people and the helping profession and wanted to get involved. So I think there is some linkage. But mostly I feel that some of my peers, those that are my age or post the baby boomer generation, some kind of thought that they became sensible in later life and abandoned their ideology, and I never really understood it because I thought we were principled and we stand for certain things. And during that era, I was tempted in my college days to maybe move to Manhattan and get involved in publishing. As I said, I was an English major. I like literature and books, and I remember studying Lillian Hellman before she became repopularized and before she became a cult, an enduring figure, and felt that that was a life that was enthralling. And it just happened, it's the late 60s and 70s, and I moved to California, beckoned onward by the intrigue of the West and the Great Golden Gate, and then found myself in the Haight in the post-Flower Children era, really. And it was a time that the city was reorganizing and reconstituting itself somewhat. And now it seems, of course, I grew to then eventually represent the district, which is quite an honor, and most of my life I've spent as a Californian. a firm, committed Californian, but with very much roots still in the East that are very vibrant and real to me.
What were your folks like?
Interesting people. My mother is French, from France, was a French war bride, married my father, who's an American GI. He said he was number 13, drafted out of New York City. His parents were working people. He's a Jew, Jewish immigrants. Grandma had a luncheonette. She said she didn't make the best, but the quickest sandwiches in Manhattan. Grandpa had a cigar stand. So humble roots, working people, people who, of course, prided themselves on education. And my father met my mother in World War II, married in her hometown, honeymooned in Paris. So I was raised with two cultures, which in some ways is very broadening. In other ways, it is a little alienated because one's not really sure where one belongs. You and I have talked about it. Both of us share having a Jewish parent.
Just one, though.
Just one.
Right, so together?
Together we're a Jew, a full Jew. Together we're a lot of things.
Yeah, that's true.
And I actually, when I moved west, became more Jewish identified because I missed the infusion of the culture that had been commonplace and regular and everyday in the East Coast. And I got to be a San Franciscan. The Jews were gentry and more assimilated and a little different.
So what pulled you to California? I mean, I understand the lure of the West. It is there's some notion that sometimes we feel we can be more who we really are when we kind of leave home to do it. And California has always been a kind of California is to the rest of the country the way America is to the world. You think you can go there and be who you are and be free, or get lost or change or whatever. Is that part of the allure? Or?
It was just kind of a half impulsive moment. I was straight then and had a boyfriend, and he was going west, and why not come along, and okay, we'll try it for a few months, see how it goes. It was a juncture having graduated college and had its own completion. And as I said, I was a little tempted with the literary life of New York, but thought, gee, maybe it's a time to try something adventuresome. My parents had raised me to be independent. When I think back, I thought they let me go rather easily and was surprised. And for the first 6 months when I was here and actually lived in Berkeley at the time, it rained almost every day. I cried almost every night. And if I could afford to schlep my stuff back, I might have. And I sort of toughed it out and then was, absolutely enchanted with the life as a Bay Arean, and then quickly adopted it as my permanent home.
And how did you get into doing this kind of pretty heavy-duty social service kind of stuff?
Again, when I came west, I found myself in the Haight, and it was, a very exciting, compelling, alive time. And there was the time that David Smith founded the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, and there were drug treatment modalities being tested and work, and I was interested in human services. I just think I always had a heart of a social worker in many perspectives. And I worked there after, got an MA in psychology at Sonoma State. In those days they had external degree programs where you took a course or two and audited them and created one's own coursework. And at the time became involved, as I said to you earlier, in Langian therapy, treatment of schizophrenics. There was a time alternate therapies were abounded. And it was the mid-'70s when there were treatments tried for certain acute illnesses and new ways of looking at drug treatment and a formulation of exciting ideas by people that were very conscionable and intelligent and thoughtful.
Was that a residential program, the R.D. Lang?
The R.D. was Lang. Yes, it was residential. You lived in for 3 nights with acute schizophrenics. These were young people, and schizophrenia hits usually before the age of 18. And these are people with acute psychotic episodes who were not drugged. So it was a difficult, trying, sometimes a little frightening, but also compelling because people are raw and real and very immediately surface with their emotions. And about a year or so, got my degree, got some graduate credit for it, and found myself in clinical settings. And pretty soon thereafter, after trying my hand on a variety of therapeutic fronts, found that I was better or felt more attuned to administering or putting something together, building it, not being a direct service person, but an oversight person. And I moved to head up a couple of large lesbian and gay nonprofit centers. In this course, I come out, and while I was getting my graduate degree, I always say left my Berkeley brown shingle life, because I married the boyfriend for 2 years, and found and was willing to say I was a lesbian, and boldly came out, and was stunned that most of my peers and new friends were in fact kind of closeted with their family. I made a bold pronouncement in a day or two, left a husband and a home, and said, here's who I am.
Wait a minute. Fell in love, decided this is who I am, and told everybody the next couple of days?
Before the end of the weekend.
That's bold.
Very bold. And I thought I was doing what everyone else did. And I just felt, I was just so excited to find myself. It felt like such a right fit, and it was such a relieving feeling. I wouldn't have said that I was hiding these great compulsions, so I wasn't even aware of the fact that I was suppressing as much my lesbianism, at least not as consciously. But when it fit right, it just felt this is the rightest thing in the world for me, and I'm proud, and I'm going to pronounce it, and those that love me will be happy for me. And naturally, my parents weren't overwhelmingly enthused. Neither were my in-laws and others.
So you were still married at the time?
At the time, and then went about the business of separating, maintained a friendship with my ex-husband that persists today. He's since happily remarried, which is a relieving thought to me.
But this is curious. I mean, this could be some projection on my part, but I experience people who would, rather than say, I think, therefore I am, though you're incredibly intelligent and bright and thoughtful, might be more the kind of people who would say, I do, therefore I am. And those are the kind of people who often say, gee, I never thought about this before, but then it hit me and it felt right. It didn't seem like it was this agonizing over it or introspection about it. It just kind of happened, and then you knew who you were?
My coming out, I had awareness and feelings, free-floating feelings, love of women. I was hoydenish. Look at that old-fashioned word.
That's a great word.
And, liked to rough and tumble and play with boys. And as I said, wasn't a traditional girl in that way. Nothing to put down any kind of traditionally reared young women. But so I had inklings and crushes and different thoughts. I married a guy who was a nice fellow whom I enjoyed being with. I didn't hate or despise or particularly put off by men. I just didn't feel that soulful connection in a deep way. So I think I was kind of surprised because I fell in love with my psychology teacher, essentially, when I was in the master's program, and it was the heart-going pitter-patter that it resonated, this is real, and this is different, and it's unique, and I haven't felt this way before, and therefore I wanted to grasp it. And in my innocence thought that I felt so good about it that all would be happy for me. And of course it's complicated, and there are hurtful feelings, and to disentangle oneself in a marriage and people, and took a little bit sorting out. That's 25 years or so or more, and it feels like it's sorted itself, and in hindsight I'm startled that I was so naive really on how I expected reactions to go. Didn't create a terrible rupture with my family. I think my family, because they're kind of oddballs, and we're independent.
Helps, doesn't it?
It helps. I didn't come from that kind of normal Americana mode. I have a foreign mother. She's a French woman. Not to say that they embrace, there's different attitudes Europeans have and others. And it isn't traditional American. I didn't have American meals cooked at home. I always had something bizarre and French and tripe and something nobody ate or thought about. I never had a hamburger. Consequently, I eat all foods because I was raised by a mother that lived through a war. And you ate what was on your table. And there was no questions asked. So I love it. My lover, Chris, he says, this is sour, I don't like the texture, I don't like the, I laugh.
You're going, fine, just set it
fine, give it to me. I mean, never had an option to say something was sour, you didn't like the texture, it was too burnt or well done, So in many ways, I felt that they instilled me with good, solid attitudes, but it just wasn't in sync with other American or suburban kids. So, yeah.
I'm interested in this. It sounds like stuff was happening all around the same time, and I don't know because I'm not sure it's all the same time frame, but you said that you moved from direct services, and this is very familiar to me too, because from what I see, it looks to me like people taking a little more leadership. And this is not to say that administration of an agency or a service is better in any way than direct services, but it's different skills, which is what you started to point out. And you said you moved to working with these two gay and lesbian groups. This was, so coming out in San Francisco, were you already in a milieu that had gay and lesbian people in it, or did this just open up to you and your work then kind of took this turn as well?
Yes, it did, and it didn't a little bit. When I came out, I became part of the feminist movement, actually lesbian separatist movement in San Francisco. There's some pretty stiff standards there.
True.
And
say more about that.
And worked for Inez Garcia's Women's Defense Fund, and she was a celebrated folk hero of the 80s, a woman that actually killed a man who held her as she was raped, and there were several such well-identified historic cases in the women's movement and, in the history of our evolution of culture about women and violence and other matters. And I started to raise money because I was in love with a woman that was part of a group and made new friends. And as I laugh to say, we sold the Berkeley brown shingle house. I tossed out all the clothes I wish I had today. Went to the Goodwill store, bought the Pendleton shirts and the boots and whatever it was, and lasted about 6 months till I was very unhappy about that. And said, again, I'd be a real separatist, but also in my money. Trying to find a way to adjust.
There's got to be a way.
There's got to be a way, and kind of then moved into more and more getting immersed in lesbian and gay culture. Initially, it was just in a lesbian culture, and as I became more politically involved, shifted a career to turn to nonprofits. So I wanted to be a lesbian and gay activist, but I wanted to also be a professional working for the movement. Was able to couple those two desires, and found that as I opened and expanded my own consciousness, and there was more of receptivity, with easement of separatist attitudes, a receptivity of working with gay men, became more politically involved as well as the nonprofit sector. Met Harvey Milk the last 6 months of his life.
How'd you meet Harvey Milk?
Firstly, I met him once because he canvassed me. I was a constituent of his when he ran for district election. He's a very charming, engaging
Came
man.
to the door?
Came to the door. I want your vote. My name is Harvey Milk. And he was a very flamboyant, engaging person and very hardworking. And so I met him briefly. But when I was the director of this large multi-service agency in Berkeley for lesbians and gays, I called him. I was a constituent, but I was employed in Berkeley, and I wanted his help to gain admission into the United Way. It was my contention that many lesbian and gay agencies over time had applied nationally and locally to the United Way. We'd given a lot of money. We'd never been let in. He said, I'm going to use my position and my power to help you because I'm a supervisor now, and they have to deal with me. And he called and convened this blue ribbon meeting of the top United Way execs. He was a histrionic, very articulate, very commanding, charismatic fellow. He threw himself on a chair. He turned his pockets inside out. He went crazy. He talked to them. He led, and what the net result of that was, in 3 months, our clinic got in, first in the nation, first in the United States of America, $50,000 grant. As I look back at it now, I realize the money through donor option, millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars today, Sheila, are raised through the United Way for lesbian and gay agencies and causes and specified donor option programs. And I love the guy because I appealed to him, and it was an East Bay constituency, but it was lesbian and gay people, and we needed help, and he was using the power of his position to apply it to help people in need, specifically the community, but all people. And I feel that with you And me, as I catch up with you here, that's one of the most satisfying and fundamental aspects of our role, is to be leaders, to be role models, to use the power and the authority of our position to get things done. Because you're right, the Speaker Pro Tem has to be contended with, the Appropriations Chair has to be contended with. And if we use our positions intelligently to advocate, but being ever vigilant to being fair-minded and consistent, that they're just enormous capabilities and possibilities. And he taught me that, and I was so warmed by that, so impressed with him, and was eternally grateful.
So he became, certainly he taught a lesson simply by example. Not that he said, I'm going to teach Carole how to do this,
That's
or
right.
that she should do it. Because everywhere he went, and there are others like him, although I'm not sure anybody ever exactly like Harvey, really just by being and doing what they did and being so insistent about
right.
it, it teaches a lesson. Because it's interesting to me, I know that you have run into some critique, and I have as well, by people who aren't sure how to characterize the aggrandizement of power in us. Some people who say, looks like they want to grab all the power they can, and makes it sound like, that's what I want. But what I just heard you say, it's very interesting, and I think it's also a point I want to take apart and listen to for a minute too. It's for something.
That's right.
You take this power for something,
Absolutely.
to do it for something. So was it Harvey's example that kind of made you first think that, or is it earlier than that as you're moving into taking these administrative roles?
No, it was Harvey's example, because I never fancied myself a gay leader, a legislator, or in anything like that, I didn't have ambitions and designs. I feel like I'm, self-made, on-the-job training person, not particularly an academician, and kind of use my wits to move forward in life. Yes, I want to seize the power. I am unabashed about that, and I hope we all are, because that's what helps make change. And if I can accomplish something that helps millions and millions of our community members and others by example, then I've succeeded in doing something good. Now, you and I will serve a term, will not, will stay in the business, we don't know who's going to replace us. We don't know if we're going to seize another opportunity in life. And unless we build those fundamental building blocks, we have to insist upon our presence to be vigilant and safeguard our issues. We would love to institutionalize our issues. I know you and I struggle every day on the legislative floor to say, somebody else pick it up for us. In your bill load, you want to talk about senior housing, domestic violence, lead abatement. My God, it's so impressive. It's true. And then you kind of pick up the community's issues. And I'm working on a headwaters for us, and I'm working on, a lot of things, and taking care of the community's issues, as we should, as is appropriate. And yes, I'll look at anyone straight on and say, I am amassing as much power as we can muster in a legitimate way. Not unchecked power, not unaccountable power, but real power. I think some of us, and I don't like the unkind things that get said about eating our young or that kind of thing. I don't think we're different than other people, but I think we're intimidated because we've been dispossessed, and we're naturally suspicious of people that seem it's a little too easy for them. They're too self-confident.
You mean we are intimidated as a community?
We as a community, and we as women. I feel I'm a harsher judge sometimes by my lesbian sisters than I am by my gay brothers. And I think some of that is because we as women aren't used to the positions of power, and we haven't gotten comfortable with it, and knowing that we should just rejoice in the opportunities and the achievements of some of us. I think that's changing. I think it's easing. I'm so, turned on by young women. Today, for instance, at committee, we had the UCLA young girls,
They were great,
those
weren't they?
19-year-olds. They're fabulous.
They're coming and telling us what our analysis should be of the bills.
They're looking at the finance bill, and they're going to be
said, "You're
future
dead wrong on this
CPAs.
one."
You're totally all wet on this
I know,
stuff.
and
I said,
they're-
look at
and
the
19 years
moxie.
old. I know, it's
They're
great.
19 years old. They're testifying in front of Madam Chair. They're 30 members. It would be an intimidating setting. I can't imagine 30 years ago, myself or my peers being able to, gather the strength and the confidence to do that. I'm excited about it.
Well, the other thing, too, is gay youth. I remember on Gay Youth Lobby Day here a couple months ago. And I know, you know, we have them all over the country. And 500 gay and lesbian kids show up. And they're like every color, and they're wearing every color, and feathers and, you know, things and nose rings and I don't know all what. But they know what they want.
Yeah.
And especially the ones who say, I want to run for office someday, or I'm going to be student body president at, you know, whatever. It is also a way in which we take responsibility. I mean, I feel like when I stand up in front of the assembly and I'm on television all over the state just banging the gavel, I'm there to be seen as well.
That's correct.
You know, there's a dyke up there doing
That's right.
Not just the first woman.
Madam Speaker's a dyke.
And they look at you chairing the Appropriations Committee, or as a supervisor, which we'll go back to the history and get, you know, through the history part. And it's not just, oh, she's grabbing so much for herself, or oh, look how she does it. But we did it. I mean, we're doing it.
Absolutely.
That's really, I think that's an important part of it.
Absolutely. And we command the respect. So whereas you and I lament and lick our wounds in private, we've had some historic battles and some wins and some losses, and thank God I'm here with you, and I feel badly that you had moments alone.
Yeah,
and you are co-joined.
When is Carole going to get here?
When is she going to get here and kind of shoulder this with me? But you know what I'm constantly reminded about is our colleagues respect us. They're fond of us, to agree. They don't agree the rhetoric. If they did believe it, we'd be smashing those myths. Because we have illustrated that we're hardworking and serious-minded and reflective and broad-based and honorable people. So what I love about it is by example, and I don't mean I'm the best test case you can get, any one of us could be. It happens I'm in this role now. So it is I, it is you, maybe someone else, it could be others. And it isn't that we want to hold on to it solely for ourselves, but we want to take the opportunity to be as full-blown as we can, to really take advantage of the opportunity, to move forward, to not regress. And I'm pleased that you say I do a good job chairing. Really I am. And my members, Republican and Dems alike, tell me so. And I know we've shifted some attitudes about being in charge of something important. And you know, something else, there's no replacement for hard work. When somebody says, what's the message? I work hard. You know, I work hard. And I'll read the material. And I'll take it home. Because I respect it. And I think it's my job.
It's also a matter of taking responsibility, which I think is a big part of this job. People, I think, don't really quite get, you know, how it's 120 hours a week and you don't sleep much, and they don't know what you do exactly. They can't see you all the time doing it. But it feels to me, too, like there has been this same struggle. Well, even when you were talking about lesbian separatism, and then we started to see, you know, gay men who were in the sexual freedom movement, and lesbian separatists who were much more involved in nonprofit work. I mean, if you were truly self-aggrandizing, would you have been doing nonprofit work? Right. I don't think so. You would have been at a bank or something, you know. Right. Coming together. And I'm interested because I know how it happened in LA, but in San Francisco as this started to happen, didn't you find that same lack of trust that had to be overcome between those two communities?
Between sort of a nonprofit and a political?
No, between the dykes and the guys.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
How did that happen for you? Because here you were in lesbian separatist, and all of a sudden you're in the gay and lesbian movement.
Well, my lesbian separatism slowly eroded as I wanted to reintegrate into life. And it's difficult to sustain that fever pitch. But it served a purpose to give one a political analysis of feminism and to understand the common linkages of women, and I hold those tenets dear. There's no disavowal here to say, isn't it, you know, to ridicule. It served a purpose to establishing our independence, our identity, and our unity, and I think a little bit of a community bond that created a foundation of a philosophical and a political perspective that one could expand and be more inclusive. So the natural movement was a segue into lesbian and gay life as opposed to a reintegration with society. And as I began to be involved in lesbian and gay nonprofit work, I think because of, you know, my diligence and unique drive in that regard, you know, rose in the ranks and took my place. Some women have said, and I think it's true, that had it not been for the terrible tragedy of AIDS, perhaps not all the women would have risen to the top. And there's a rebellion against the gay movement saying it's all white male, we're the women. I know we still go through this if we go into a meeting or who are our friends or a dinner. But that's the natural developmental cycle. It was always first men. And it was largely white men, with no disrespect to my brothers. And then women came along, and then people of color, and that's the progression of all movement in life. We're the ones that are kind of trying to wedge our way in.
Well, and also to see the connections between them. I mean, I think some of the guys who had never even been to a march, I remember going to the March on Washington and having these young men say, gee, I've never been to a march before. And I'm thinking, this is my 427th march. You know, it was like abortion and, you know, choice and all kinds of stuff.
That's
and the war. And I look at them and think, you've never been to a march? But
they haven't had the pain and the oppression. The gayness has made them that way, but otherwise they've enjoyed a certain privilege. And it's their gayness that made them political, because they were rejected and not used to it. We were women always rejected. We were used to it.
Right.
And it's true about nonprofit work. Frankly, I harbor, you know, resentment because I always felt that the lesbians were the founder of services, and sometimes we were backbenched. Things that were called women's services were euphemisms for the fact that there were lesbians involved. And in the early days, whether it were the women's shelters, the women's building, or the centers, the cornerstone of the activism and the work was often uncredited by lesbians that took a back seat to it. And as you know, in the early days of NOW and others, as Phyllis and Del, you know, struggled to get in, that we as lesbians have fought to have our acknowledgement, even within our women's movement,
right.
And that we continue, you know, to battle. And I do feel somehow we as lesbians, or we as women, Jews have said this in the past, are held to a different standard. We work harder to achieve.
Well, I think a lot of social services agencies, I mean, I look at the homeless agencies around the state, and half of them are run by lesbians, whether they're out or they're not
That's
out.
correct.
And the agency may not want this to be known or whatever,
That's
you know.
right.
But everything, anything that has anything to do with poverty, half the time it's us.
That's right. That's right.
And you were saying the same thing about adoptions. It was interesting. We have a bill on the floor of the Assembly about, you know, sort of opening up adoptions to more people, single parents, grandmothers, etc., and including our community. And when you were talking to people about our place in that arena.
Yeah, because a recent field poll, state of California, found 64%, of all the brouhaha, 64% of Californians favor lesbian and gay adoptions. Now, you and I and others are fighting a draconian, long-standing Wilson administration policy to discourage lesbian and gay adoption through the Department of Social Services. It's astounding. Now, people say, why is that the case? That most Californians, 2/3 almost, favor it. And I say it's because we take the unwanted kids. And everyone knows that we want to give children a home. So the crack-addicted babies, the abandoned babies, the troubled babies, the babies that need a chance, we don't necessarily take the perfect, pristine babies. We take the babies that need a home, and somewhere in the recesses of people's consciousness, they're aware of them, and therefore they support it. So I always say, you know, you believe in the fundamental goodness or discerning abilities of people, and even on these lesbian and gay measures, as slowly the public attitude is shifting because we've done our work, and there is greater receptivity to inclusiveness. You know, I feel very heartened by it, truly. And I think it's a better time and a better age for us in remarkable ways.
Carole Migden, the optimist. Of course, my definition of an optimist is a person who knows how terrible everything can be and therefore is never disappointed.
Lower your standards, my father used to say.
Exactly, lower your standards. So how do you get from the nonprofit work that you were doing to politics?
Well, I started to have both lives coincide, my professional work, and earned a paycheck through nonprofit. As I said, I had a friendship with Harvey Milk and joined the Harvey Milk Club. He was tragically killed 6 months after I met him. I was one then in a series of candidates after Mayor Feinstein at the time made an appointment. I was still kind of a residual lesbian separatist and wanted to run against my mentor and friend Harry Britt, who received the appointment, albeit that he was reluctant, and immersed myself as I do, just plunged and said I'd be interested in being a district supervisor. I loved Harvey and his verve and saw what he could do and thought I am a can-do person. I can help impact. So I over the course, 2 years later, ran my first citywide election for community college board. I lost, but almost won. I think what you find out in political life, you're allowed to lose if you lose well.
That's true.
You know, and it kind of then put me on the map, as they say, and then immersed myself thereafter in Democratic Party politics, became a political activist on the gay and the traditional Democratic Party front, became chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party, became a national platform committee member and a Democratic National Committee woman and a chair of the Lesbian and Gay Caucus State of California Democratic Party, just riddled with credentials and involvement in party politics over the course of 8 years, until I ran for citywide supervisor. And in San Francisco, by the way, these are citywide seats for County Board of Supervisors.
So you don't get elected by district?
Not by district.
The whole city?
Whole city, 150,000 votes, a lot of votes,
Wow.
a lot of money. And I put myself forward in a field of challengers for open seats, you know, did very well, placed as the top challenger, was very pleased about that, and was elected outright in 1990. And I just worked, I think, with a tremendous degree of focus. I wanted to be a county supervisor. I had party credentials. The truth is I love politics. I love running a phone bank. I'm happy to be a campaign manager. The fact that I'm the office holder now is very pleasing to me. But all facets to me are very engaging.
Why is that, Carole? What's fascinating about it?
I love the people and the fact that what we do matters in life. So you get people kind of at the pinnacle of their concern. It's not sort of mundane. It's something that matters, whether we build legislation or not, whether we're pleasing people or not. 30 people come out to a hearing on a Tuesday afternoon because they care about something. They want to tell you, and I respect their right. And I think it's privileged to serve. I think it's an honor. I truly do, in a corny way. I think it's an honor to have work that is meaningful and to represent public service and people in the public. And part of what I want to do is sort of elevate people's, the esteem of politicians. You know, it is upsetting to me that we are ridiculed and, you know, berated often and, you know, made to be caricatures. And I want people to say, gee, I don't always agree with her, but she's honest and hardworking and she'll call you back.
Well, John Steinbeck said, you know, when people are running for office, we want them to be much better than we are. And, oh no, it's the opposite, sorry. That we want them to be just like us because we want to vote for somebody that's just like us. Then as soon as they're elected, we want them to be much better than we are. I was like blowing the last line of a joke.
I love that. It worked.
He wrote this book called America and the Americans, and actually had a wonderful take on the way we feel about immigrants. He said, I bet you the first guy jumped off the Mayflower onto Plymouth Rock, turned around and said, okay, this is my country, the rest of you foreigners go home. And it's a good book.
It resonates.
I recommend it.
I think that's true.
Is there a big difference in being a supervisor in San Francisco and being an assembly member here?
Yeah, a great difference. Well, firstly, I think it's a grander arena, and it is a little less, you know, sometimes sort of insider, localized issues aren't as easy for me. I think it absorbs my personality better. I have a bigger chamber to take the full-blown Carole Migden into account. I think things matter. It's grander legislation and making a difference in people's lives. At first, I wasn't sure how I'd adapt, and I was just enthralled by the job. Homesick a couple of days. I rushed to get home. I love my city, and I want to be in San Francisco to get infused with the San Francisco spirit. I'm so proud to be a San Franciscan. It is the most liberal and progressive, you know, district of the state in the country. I feel I have a great liberty to vote any way I choose, and I feel freed by the burden other members, although we all try to be conscionable. I never am faced with, will this hurt me in the district?
Right.
You know, I never have that concern. I sometimes do feel like I don't want to be brought up short. I have to explain myself, so let's make some sense here. And that's for sure. But I feel there's kind of like a latitude and an openness. It is an accepting city and one that thrives to respect people. And so I take that and try to incorporate it into my role in the legislature. And I feel that we San Franciscans in that regard have a role to play to kind of move the agenda forward, to perhaps throw the spear the furthest or be the boldest or the most unabashed, because there is, great latitude that the good people of San Francisco have afforded me.
Well, and there's only a few progressives, really. I mean, when you get right down to it, I think in any legislature, certainly in the 90s, you can always count the progressives on just about the fingers of one hand.
That's right.
And you count on the folks, from the city, as even we Angelinos will allow you to refer to it as the city.
We say the city, that's right.
It's true, but you're right. And you can explain to people how it's a good thing for the state, to be good to the people and to take all the people into account. I feel more patriotic in this job than I ever had. I mean, we were talking the other day about the military stuff and how, I was never wanting any of the military stuff to happen because I wasn't in favor of war.
Yeah.
And yet, there's a difference between that and the kind of democracy. I mean, when you were talking about, I heard you, I think, saying being fully yourself in this job. First of all, I've never been in a room full of people with personalities as big as mine before. And here it is. So it lets you do and say and even be funny, which is a very important part of the job.
Absolutely.
But it also gives you this feeling about democracy. I mean, I look at you and me, we live in great big cities, and I look at Virginia Straw Martin, who lives in a village of 72 people.
That's right.
Up in the very northern reaches, and we're all equal in the assembly.
That's right.
It's kind of it's a fascinating thing. And even getting along with the people who don't like gay and lesbian people.
That's right, because we're bringing them along.
Yeah.
Because we're ambassadors. And that's the heart of challenges, and that's where we're placed here. Anyone can be here and be oppositional and dig their heels in and not try and bridge and brook a compromise. That's what our challenges is, to hold our personal feelings, to try harder, to get nourished together, to go back out again, to try and move it forward. That is our duty. We don't have permission to act out or be fed up or turn on our heels or walk away. It's too important. Too many people are invested in what you and I can achieve. And I do feel that I am a California legislator. And we Bay Areans, sure we are, we're a little snooty and full of ourselves, but we also have a regional perspective. It's an eye-opener to me that this is an agricultural state. It's about avocados and tomatoes, and it's about a lot of things. Labeling fruit today took a good portion of the Appropriations Committee.
That's true.
Or it's timbers, and it's owls, and it's all kinds of things that are important and warrant respectful consideration. So I am intrigued to learn, and I do feel, certainly I'm trying to represent the interests of my district, but I'm trying to also make responsible policy for the people of California, and I take that seriously. And I want to be in check, and I want to make sure that I'm sure-footed and honest and open in how I consider information. And that's why I thrive in absorbing all this new information, because it's brand new and intriguing. And when you talk about the democratic process working, yes, I feel patriotic too. And I remember in Natural Resources, just seated here about a year or so, because I've just been in the legislature about 14 months now. My first committee assignment was a bill with the military whether they could use a certain smog oil, which was one of their camouflage techniques, part of war games. And the enviros were saying they'll hurt a leaf, and so, you know what I mean, and they'll make the earth black, and the military saying it's the only place in the United States, and it's national security. I remember pondering, who's thinking about these things? But yes, I have a responsibility here to look at this, not just smash down the military operations because I think we don't support a military, or to not consider the interests, of course, of the leaf and the wildlife, but balanced against national security considerations. I have a responsibility to not be flippant here.
Right.
I have a responsibility to make sure that I think I'm doing the right thing, and I have deliberated fully on it. And it was the commandeer general in the office and all kinds of things, people I've never been coupled with. And I thought, what a tremendous opportunity. And he's coming to the lesbian legislator. And he's asking for something. And I don't know what he expected, but I bet he was pleasantly surprised to have someone who really wanted to connect and hear what he has to say and grant him the respect of consideration of his proposal.
What do you think our role, or the role of elected people, or in our community is in the greater movement? I mean, we talk a little about role model, but I think it goes beyond that. I'm not even sure what my question means, but...
We're a lot of things. We're colorful figures, and I think, therefore, we're there to inspire somewhat. Sometimes things become glib in a soundbite and a little piece of it. So I think I try sometimes to sustain, I'm not always the soundbite, or I'm not the 6 o'clock news in 10 seconds. And so there's a little bit of how do you inspire and captivate attention. You know what I feel a lot? I don't get on national TV all that often. Now you're putting me on this afternoon. I'm happy. Whenever I do, though, I get a call from the guys at Kelly's in Chicago saying, you look great, or a lesbian in Kansas that feels good about something. And that really excites me. The number of real people who say, you being there means something to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's profound and fundamental. And then beyond that, I think it is saying, as a role model, and those get sort of hackneyed terms, but to say you too can do as well. We laughed today at committee, and you said you're near 60, I'm near 50. We're kind of moving along. We're doing pretty good for, I once said, for a couple of scruffy broads. But they're the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds, and look how they will be. So it is the mentoring and creating a foundation or an openness. I feel if I'm just kind of like wedging the door open, if I do nothing else to provide a doorstop to make an entrance, and by which the floodgates are open, then dozens of more, young, ambitious, capable lesbians and gays come forward, that will have been a lot.
There was also a distrust in the community for the establishment, mm-hmm. for those in power, because mm-hmm. we suffered badly at their hands. Mm-hmm. We couldn't get the drugs tested that we need, and we couldn't mm-hmm. get the medical establishment mm-hmm. to respond, and the government wouldn't do funding, and nobody was friendly. Mm-hmm. And so there was this sort of, it's happened in all the movements, there's mm-hmm. this sort of feeling like maybe mm-hmm. if you go there, you'll get captured. Mm-hmm. My experience has been just the opposite. Mm-hmm. And what about yours?
Totally opposite. And again, it's having, I think, the integrity of a self-confidence to not be co-opted. There is a little bit of a downward nobility or a devaluing or a suspect or something that I think we're kind of ironing out a little bit as a community. And that's a carryover, of form of philosophy. So I think that's true, but again, I'm here to account, and I'm happy to. And I also want to maybe look a little bit more dressed up, let my hair get curly and wild. They love to tease me in my district about my hair and stuff, and that's fun, and I enjoy it. And I want the opportunity to be myself as a character, but also to adhere. And if it means, they look at you with the intelligence and the confidence and the academic credentials and the star-born credentials, and me as kind of self-made, can-do-it, operational person, and I'm in a dress and you're not, and whatever it all is, and I'm adjusting my lipstick and you aren't. Vive la différence, and be broadened and enhanced by it rather than threatened by it.
There's another difference, too, and I'm interested in your experience, because I have not been in a relationship the past couple of years that I've been in the Assembly, so I have not demonstrated coupleness, established coupleness in any way to my colleagues. So I can talk about our relationships and our families mm-hmm. and whatever, but I can't demonstrate it. Mm-hmm. You're in a long-term relationship.
Yes, I am.
What is that like? And you're very private, and I, of course, don't want to push you to talk more than you want to, but what is it like? Because you're very much like the rest of our colleagues who are in a marriage.
That's right.
And that's important to them to see, I think.
And one of my exciting moments, in fact, Chris and I, Chris Argatis, my lover, have been together 12 years, and she's a well-renowned criminal defense lawyer and almost near expert golfer. And one of the first things I did in the legislative handbook when we get the questionnaire is saying, what's your name and where do you live and do you have graduate degrees and where were you born, and all the little tidbits of interesting personal data that we compile in that very dignified black book that we emboss. The form came and it said married. And I thought, I am married. But I didn't want to say married. This was right in the middle of the lesbian gay marriage bills as well, so I didn't want to misrepresent. So I crossed it out and I put spouse. Spouse Chris Argatis. I get a call back from the woman in repo. Now,
we don't have a category.
We don't have it. What's this, a spouse? Do you fit into that? I said, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? I am in a couple, and yes, Chris is my spouse, and I suppose you have to, figure out how to handle it. When the book came out, it said Carole Migden married Chris Argatis. There's that little small M. Mm-hmm. And I was just so tickled by it. And one of our colleagues, a more moderate Republican woman, came over to me and said, gosh, what are they saying that you're in the book? Which meant that I knew. No one was saying a word to me, but all they were talking about is to her. She's the only one bold enough to say, how could you? Now, of course, this is a book that we all share as common members. It represents the legislature. We all get 100 of them to send out to our families and friends. So every one of them had my marriage to Chris Argatis prominently displayed. There was a hush. No one ever, other than our colleague, dealt with it indirectly, but I thought, geez, this is a milestone. But the answer is I'm blessed to have Chris. It has been a 12-year enduring, solid relationship. It is, by example, something I can herald and evidence to say that we're good people. We live together. We pay taxes. We support your schools. We want to have a chance here. We're honorable. We do the right thing. And it has been a great, it buoys me, because as you know, we take these excruciating body blows and hits, and I'm glad to have a woman who loves me as I am and is there to nurture and support me.
Well, it was funny when we were talking about this too, and you said, and you just said it again, loves me as I am. If you'd lost your race, and you said, and I had to go open up a travel agency somewhere or whatever. Yeah. Chris wouldn't care.
She wouldn't care.
But that's what family's for.
That's what it is. It's not that we were together before I was a political figure. And, I used to say I'd have a baby, name it Defeat, because somebody said, do you ever want to have a baby? I said, a little fleetingly. Or I'd open a travel agency or become a bodybuilder. I could see going to do that, joining the meets in Stockton with a girl and, rolling barbells, But it isn't predicated on political life. It isn't that she's with a minor celebrity. And I think if I were to say, gee, because she always worries. She thinks we're like little princesses now with the attention we get as legislators. And what will you do when you don't have the staff and the stature and really people attending to you? So she cares about me in that way, but would be totally happy to have me make soup and have a normal life.
Yes, which we don't have.
Which we do not have.
So what do you see in your future?
I love my job. And I don't know if this happened to you, but as soon as I got here, in 10 minutes, people would say, what are you doing next?
Yeah, right. Me too.
And I haven't even unpacked the cartons, really. I said, what do you mean? It's such a discredit and disservice, as if this station isn't great. And I thought I'd done really well getting here. So I love my job in life in the legislature. I'd like to continue to serve. It seems we have some reprieve and term limits. So if I have to hopscotch around, I want to do it. I don't have the ultimate goal. If I don't attend this, I won't feel successful. But I do feel like I want to find a way to keep current and keep involved, the next 10, 20 years. And I'm totally prepared to seek whatever steps will help assure that.
Are you happy?
Yeah, I'm really happy.
It's great, isn't it?
It's great. It's really fun. Even the hard parts. You go back, all the press, my constituents read the paper and they say, geez, that was a terrible battle. What was that? And they can't understand, I'm so excited, saying, yes, it was terrible, but boy, was it fun.
Well, when the gay marriage bill won on the floor last year, and it was reported in the LA Times that I burst into tears, and the interpretation was I was upset that the bill passed. But the truth was, when you're in the middle of a fight, you feel fierce and you don't cry. Yeah. It was when my friends came over to stand by me like little lions next to the chair, and make sure I was okay. That's when I burst into tears. It was when people, it's like they like me. They really like me.
They do.
And it is a very, it's a very close-knit, it's like going away to college, isn't it?
Yeah.
all these friends that you never would have thought you wanted to be friends with.
And you are, and you're different, and we're tied in this bond, and it is exhilarating, eye-opening. I feel the same way, because we're raw in that stuff. We're like threadbare. We're ripped open. It doesn't happen to others. And you know something? We're the only community where it's permitted to say those unkind things.
Right.
So if people feel other things about different minority groups or different individuals or classification for people, they know that it's not allowed to be said. So the difference is we're open game for all of that repression and others, some of which may be displayed, some of which projected onto us. And it is so humiliating and unfair and undignified in its fundamentals. And I don't mind. I will be humiliated every day and humbled if it's going to advance. And it isn't personal, but I feel it community-wide. And it is, so when our members come forward and join hands, it is the most base kind of connection we need from them, and I'm eternally grateful to them for it.
Well, I can't believe a whole hour went by already, but we're in the last 30 seconds. Do you believe it? Carole, thank you so much for doing this. Here we are at the end of a long day here in Sacramento with this fabulously serious decor with the flags and everything, which of course you and I do not sit in offices like this. But thanks so much. I was so pleased to have you here.
Thank you.
And very pleased that you joined us for another great Get Used to It.